All right, so welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking about investment, and specifically for beginners.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and we're going to be taking a look at the material that, our listeners sent in and really try to break this down,
Yeah.
Investment is one of those things where it can feel like you're walking into a jungle,
Yeah.
It's just this big, massive thing that you're like, oh my gosh, where do I even begin?
It can be super intimidating for sure.
Right, exactly. So hopefully we can use this deep dive to kind of give people a little map and compass, to start to navigate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the listener sent in a piece called Investment Podcast for Beginners.
Great title.
Yeah. I mean, very, very straight to the point. You know, I mean, it's so funny how often investment is portrayed as this like super complicated thing.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't have to be.
No, not at all. And I think that's why these resources that kind of, just break it down into simple terms are so helpful.
Yeah.
One of the things that really jumped out at me as I was reading this was the idea of just starting small.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to have, thousands and thousands of dollars.
Right. You don't have to be like, Warren Buffett to get
Exactly. It's really about, starting with something small that you're comfortable with and building that habit of,
Yeah, like building that muscle memory.
Exactly.
Let us be.
Yeah, and getting comfortable with the process.
Yeah, and this source actually recommends starting with something that you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's just like, $5 or $10.
Yeah.
It's more about just getting in there and kind of getting your hands dirty.
You know, I think that's a great way to put it because it's really about kind of getting over that fear of getting started.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Another big thing that this source really stresses is the importance of diversification.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I think a lot of people kind of shy away from that word because they're like, oh gosh, that sounds complicated. But really what it means is don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
Right. So, so how does this source suggest kind of, going about diversifying your investments?
Yeah, so they talk about a couple of different investment vehicles like stocks, bonds, and mutual funds.
Okay.
So stocks, for instance, when you buy a stock, you're essentially buying a tiny piece of ownership in a company.
Yeah.
So like if you buy stock in, Apple or Tesla, you're becoming a part owner of that company.
You're a shareholder.
Exactly.
So you're a shareholder. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And what about bonds?
So bonds are a little different. When you buy a bond, you're essentially lending money to an entity like a government or a company, and they agree to pay you back that loan amount plus interest over a set period of time.
So it's kind of like a loan agreement.
Exactly.
But you're getting a guaranteed return.
Yeah, generally speaking, bonds are considered to be a little bit less risky than stocks.
Okay. So lower risk, but probably also lower reward.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Typically, the returns on bonds are lower than the potential returns on stocks.
Gotcha. And what about mutual funds? What are those all about?
So a mutual fund is basically a basket of different stocks or bonds.
Okay.
So it allows you to kind of diversify your investments easily because a single mutual fund might hold hundreds of different stocks or bonds.
So you're not individually picking out each stock or bond.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a really convenient way to kind of spread out your risk.
Yeah. And it sounds like a really good option for, beginners who are just kind of dipping their toes in the water.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I'm gathering from all of this is that this investment podcast for beginners is a really, really great starting point for anyone who just wants to learn the lingo, learn the basics.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree.
Yeah. And one thing I did really appreciate about this source is how they kind of ended with this idea of you need to be patient and take a long-term perspective.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
It's not about getting rich quick.
Yeah.
It's about steadily building your wealth over time.
Exactly. And that's a really important concept to grasp because a lot of people, they get into investing thinking that they're going to make a quick buck, and that's just not realistic.
It's not like gambling.
No, not at all.
You're not going to Vegas.
It's more like planting a tree.
Right.
You plant the seed, you nurture it, and you give it time to grow.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of to wrap things up for our listener, think about everything that we've talked about and what aspect of investing kind of speaks to you the most.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of owning a little piece of a company through stocks, or is it maybe the steady return of bonds that feels more appealing?
Yeah, or maybe even the simplicity of mutual funds.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many different ways to approach it, and it really just depends on your individual goals and your risk tolerance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And really, I think the biggest takeaway is just keep exploring,
Yeah.
Be curious.
Yeah, that curiosity is what makes investing so fascinating. Totally. I completely agree.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.